everyone, it's the Eclectic Handyman. Today we're going to see how to use a one-person brake bleed system on any S197 Mustang or Shelby that has the Brembo brake package on it. Let's get into it. All right, let's take a look at the setup and what we're going to use today. Starting off with the Motive Power Bleeder. This is a one-person system. It's got a vacuum pump handle on it, a gauge readout right here so we know how much to create vacuum on, as well as the tubing and the cap. Now, this is the Motive Power Bleeder 0118. I'll link to it below with the billet cap. This step is absolutely critical so you're not pulling your hair out. You must get the right cap for your application. Ford was inconsistent with some of the brake reservoirs, and so what you need to do is take, if you have one, a digital caliper or just a regular measurement tape and measure both the inside and outside diameter of your cap and measure it like 27 times and make sure that you get the right dimensions. Then go to the Motive site and look up and make sure you get the right cap, because here's what's going to happen. If you don't get the right cap, you will not create vacuum seal on the system, and none of this will work. You also are going to need fresh brake fluid. Now, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and use the existing High Performance DOT 3 PM1C for my application. Make sure that you have plenty because we'll be filling this up and flushing the system. Now, whether you're flushing or bleeding, the difference being if you're bleeding the system because you took a caliper off, some air was introduced, and you just need to get the air out of it, you'll need less. If you are flushing it, like if you were changing the type of brake fluid that you're using, going from DOT 3 to 4 or 5, then you'll need much more. Now, I will say everybody races, no pun intended, to go get DOT 4 and 5 because it's reasonably cost and just flush your system. But do know that even though you get the higher boiling point, those truly are made for track or for racing. So if you're not doing that and just a daily driver, the DOT 3 actually is more resistant to bringing in water and absorbing water, which brake fluid does naturally. And this stuff is still really, really good. So be pragmatic about which brake fluid that you're choosing for your application. You don't necessarily need to have it. If you do go with DOT 4 or 5, I recommend bleeding your system annually with fresh brake fluid. This will last a little bit longer. You're going to need a wrench to bleed at the calipers, and if you're going to go the extra step to crack the lines on the master cylinder reservoir itself, you'll need a flare wrench like this with a 13 millimeter, and then at the caliper on my application, it's 11 millimeter. Also, with the Motive setup here, there are two different seals that it comes with. One is thinner, one is thicker. I used the thicker seal. It's still a challenge to fully create a vacuum at time. So what you also can do is, if you have it handy, just add a little bit of SIL-Glyde, which is brake lubricant, which is acceptable for the system. We're not talking about big globs that are going to fall down in the master cylinder, but it does help so that we have a good vacuum. And that hole needs to be opened. There's a little bit of an insert that you pull out when you buy the kit. So most people who do the bleeding with the Motive Power Bleeder get upset because they can't create a vacuum. It's either they're using the wrong seal, the wrong cap, or one of these things. It's important to get all that homework done before we start. You're also going to need a catch can for the individual wheels. I got this one off of Amazon. I love it. It has a magnet. I stick it right to the rotor. It's got the tubing on it. I can put it right to the nipple and open the line up, and then away we go with the bleeding. It probably took more time to explain this than some of the procedure itself. So let's go ahead and start with step one. The first step is just to pump the brakes a few times. And if you have some brake fade and it's going to the floor, that's okay. We've got air in the lines. You want to go ahead and just build up pressure. Do it slowly and just get a little bit of pressure on it. That's step one. All right, after pumping the brakes a few times, come up to the reservoir. Go ahead and take the cap off. Now, brake fluid is unfriendly to paint, so make sure you have a fender cover. Use some old t-shirts to kind of line around just in case. This is not going to be messy unless you mess up, but if in case you didn't have a proper vacuum and it started to spray, you wouldn't want this getting on anything. Now, the first step with using the power bleeder, we're actually going to use it dry. So just go ahead, screw the cap on really tight by hand is enough. And then we're going, with no fluid inside, we're going to go ahead and put this cap on. So I'll bring it over to the reservoir, push down, and make sure it is locked and firmly in place. Again, this is the step where people are going to get frustrated if they don't have the right cap or the right seal. Now, you want to pump this up to 10 to 15 PSI. I've done 10 often and it's plenty. And the way this works, I do like these little tool trays next to the car. I think they're very convenient, but you don't have to. If you've got something else, even a cardboard box that you can set up, you just go ahead and twist the handle, then pump it up, and you will begin to create vacuum. Now, this cylinder, the lines, and everything is pretty large. It's going to take a little bit of time to create some vacuum on the system. That is normal. And what we're going to be looking for here are any leaks or problems. So let's go ahead and get this pumped up to 10 PSI to start with. All right, I can lock it into place, check my gauge, and as you can see, we're holding right at 10 PSI. Now the idea here is that we want to wait a minute or two and make sure that there is no drop in pressure. And the first area we're going to check is right at the reservoir itself. Make sure that there's no fluid leaking. You would know right away when you're pumping if there was a hissing or some of the fluid was spraying out. You don't have the right suction and the right seal here. So make sure that's dry, and it is. So while we're doing that, we can come over to the brakes and check if there's any leaks, especially if you've done a job like I have where I replaced the brake lines. Now that may not be a thing that you did, but you want to see if it's dripping there, maybe at the brake line itself on the caliper. Going to the rear, just double checking there's nothing dripping there, or at the valve itself. Give it a minute or two and just check all those spots. All right, now here's an extra step that I always like to do and I recommend before starting at the wheels, which are there are two brake lines, hard lines that go into the reservoir itself. Now, while it's at the 10 PSI and holding steady, I want to go ahead and crack both of those open independently. I'll start with the right, then do the left. Open it for a second or two. What that'll do is if any air had gotten introduced up at this point right here, that will pull that out. Could also stuff a little shop rag down in there before, right under, just to catch any fluid. Got my line wrench in place. A little difficult to see down there, but now I'm going to break it open. Just for a second, it's coming out. All right, and now that that has been opened, I can tighten it back. Bye-bye, wrench. Let me grab that. Thank you, magnet. Now we can move to the other one, which is on the left. This one admittedly is much easier to get to. Same procedure, break it open. You may have to turn the wrench around. It's a little tip on these flare to get a second go at it. All right, it's leaking out. Let me see. You can see down there some fluid, and tighten it back up. I just leave it open for a second or two. This accomplishes the task of getting that air out. Once again, snug it up. Don't have to go crazy here. And there we have it. Both of our front lines have been bled as a extra precaution. And now we can prep our motive brake bleeder for the wheels. All right, so it's been several minutes. We are still holding at 10 PSI. We were able to get those front lines bled. So the next step is we need to let the pressure out of the system out. It always works the same way with these motive brake bleeders. You just very gently open up the cap. It'll start hissing. Just do it slowly. You don't need to rip it open. You never, ever, ever, by the way, take the cap off the car with this pressurized. It will make brake fluid spray everywhere. All right, so I have let the pressure out. It's down to 0. And now we're ready to pour in some fluid. Go ahead and take that off. And we can begin to put in our fresh brake fluid. Now, do mind also that you need sealed and not super old brake fluid. If you have an old can that you used a year ago or something like that, it's probably no good. As I mentioned earlier, brake fluid naturally will attract water. So if it's been sitting on your shelf, even in a cool environment, I do not recommend using it. Just go ahead and get new brake fluid. I'm going to go ahead and pour in a canister and a half, maybe 2 canisters directly into the bleeder. And we'll get the second one in there too. You never want this to go dry throughout the procedure. So you can, that's why they make it clear. You can see from the outside. Excellent. Again, if you are actually flushing the system and changing out brake fluid types, you're going to need quite a bit, maybe a couple of pints to get all of the old fluid out. All right, at this point, we want to go ahead and tighten that back up again, hand tight. This is plastic. You don't need to use any kind of crazy wrench on it. We just need to be able to have vacuum on it. Some folks may opt to use like a baster to go ahead and pull out the old fluid just to not waste any, and then start by filling it with some fresh fluid before we do the bleeding procedure. You're welcome to do that. I had changed the lines and already lost so much fluid that I already had lost a little bit in here and topped it off. Before starting this procedure though, you do want to make sure you're at the correct level. Okay, before we begin adding vacuum, just make sure that cap is secure once again. And we're going to go between 10 and 15 PSI. So the same procedure as before. Begin pumping it up. And again, this will take a little while because now we're drawing fluid through these lines. If at any time during any of this procedure, this runs low, you will repeat the steps we just did. Slowly let the pressure out from the cap here, not from the cap at the reservoir. Add more brake fluid and then apply vacuum to the system again. Some folks choose to do it like that so they don't waste any, because if you fill it up in here and maybe you don't want to reuse that fluid, so you just add enough at a time. We're getting great vacuum. I'll go probably around 12 PSI. Lock it into place and let's check. Again, we're holding steady, so we're ready to proceed. One other note, if you are losing vacuum, it may not just be at the cap as well. One time I had a leak at a line and that was making it extremely hard to pump this up. That's another indication that you don't have a sealed system. All right, the order on the car, we're going to start with the right rear. And the reason that you do this is you go to the furthest point from the brake reservoir and then make your way toward the reservoir. So it'll be right rear, right front, left front. If you happen to be watching this video and you're not doing a Mustang or a Shelby or this type of car, check your own service manual for the order that you'll bleed the brakes. Go ahead and remove the rubber cap off of the brake bleed valve on the caliper. Let's place our reservoir on the rotor. Love the magnet. And we will take our 11mm wrench, place it on the bleed screw, apply the hose, loosen and open the line. And we can see the brake fluid coming through on its own. And what we're looking here are bubbles, old color fluid, whatever your goal is here. So this is slowly making its way down into the reservoir. And that's one way that you can tell. If it's a kind of a dark brown, not light golden color, that's the old fluid. So we're going to leave this open for the amount of time that it takes for no more bubbles and clear fluid to come through. That may be anywhere from 20 seconds to a couple of minutes. I'd also like to mention, specific to these calipers on the rear, there is a service procedure if you had removed the caliper from the service manual to, when you have the caliper off, have somebody pump the brakes, which extends the piston, and then you open up the bleed valve and screw the piston back in to get all the initial air out. So that part you won't be able to do here with this bleeder system. That's only if you had removed the caliper. Make sure to do that ahead of doing this part of the bleed. You can also run back over the reservoir, make sure there's no leaks while you're doing this procedure. And as always, make sure that we're not losing vacuum and we have plenty of brake fluid. All right, the fluid is looking clear and great. There are no bubbles. It's time to go ahead and tighten it up. Again, you don't have to go crazy on that. You just want to make sure there's no leaks. Remove the line. I like to squeeze it and then hold it directly upright so that I don't leak any out over the brakes. We're going to remove our canister off the wheel and let's go to the left rear. All right, now we're set up here at the left rear. Time to open the bleeder valve. Got some initial bubbles and we're going to let that go. Same as before. You can see that fluid pressing through. You can even see the bubbles down here below as this vacuum system is working just as it should. Continuing to see some bubbles come through. Small bubbles here.
A few moments later.
Fluid is nice and clear on this wheel. No more bubbles. Go ahead and tighten this up. Same procedure, squeeze it. I don't want any dripping. And let's go to the front right and take a look at those Brembo brakes. All right, getting set up here on the front Brembo brakes, there are 2 bleed screws on it. There's one on the outside and one on the inside. I've already taken off the rubber covers. We will start with the inside, closer to the fender well, and then move to the outside. Go ahead and get my wrench on. It's the exact same size, 11 millimeter. My catch can in place. Connect the hose, open up the valve, and there we go. We immediately have the fluid rushing. Now you will see on the fronts, naturally, this happens a little faster than the rear of the car. Same procedure, check for air bubbles, old fluid. Let's keep it open until we get it like we like it. Okay, that's looking awesome. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten it up. And then squeeze it, let it drain down. Move my wrench to the front side, put the tube back on, open it up. And there we go, we can see the fluid going here as well. And we're also filling up our canister at the same time. In between bleeding, you can dump this out and let it continue to fill up. Excellent, the fluid looks amazing, no air bubbles. We'll go ahead and tighten that back down. And one thing that I do optionally is sometimes, especially on the fronts, that's where you're going to get a lot of the air trapped. I'll go ahead and do this again. I'll go to the inside and the outside just to make sure it's fully bled. Let's move to the last wheel, the front left, which is the driver's side right by the master cylinder. Last wheel, identical procedure. Let's do the inside. Open it up. Here comes the brake fluid. Got some bubbles in here. Also, make sure to continually check the motive brake bleeder and make sure that there is brake fluid in there and you never run dry. That fluid's looking cool. There are no more bubbles. Let's go ahead and move it to the front. After we tighten that down, same procedure. Open it up. There we go. A little bit of bubbles in the fluid. Let's let that wait. Fluid's clear. No more bubbles. Tighten it down. Remove it. And I guess it goes without saying as well, you want to clean up around that nipple because even though we were careful, there's going to be some residual brake fluid, especially if you have painted calipers. All right, just about done. Final step here now that we're done bleeding at the wheels. As I've mentioned multiple times, we want to release pressure from the bleeder itself, not from the cap. Just do it slowly. You'll hear a little hissing here. There we go. We're losing pressure. Do it slowly. We don't want any of that fluid spraying anywhere. And then the final step is to remove the cap. Now I will tell you, you can see there's a little bit of fluid. So you want to first unscrew it very slowly, make sure there's no pressure. You see that fluid drop down. I'm just gonna leave it there for a second. I'm going to immediately turn it over and up and away from the car. Just like that. And have a rag handy, and then we can clean up the extra. Also make sure that the level is appropriate for the reservoir. If it's a little low, add just a little bit of fresh fluid. If it happens to be too high, you can just use a little baster and pull it out and then put the cap back on. All right, gonna pump the brakes, make sure everything's in working order. What I'm checking for is I don't want brake fade. If I hit the brake pedal and it slowly goes to the floor, then we have air trapped in the system and we need to repeat the process. However, with that brake bleeder, it's very thorough, so the odds that unless you had a vacuum leak or a problem, that pedal feels so awesome right now. So there we have it. We've completed our single person brake bleeder with the Motive Power Bleeder system. I think it went really well. If you do this from start to finish and you've got all your ducks in a row and everything, you can easily do this within inside of 20 minutes. Very efficient and productive. Anyway, hope you found this useful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Check out the other content on the channel, especially related to the GT500 and my old Cobra. And until next time, this is the Eclectic Candyman. We'll see you later.